Parmenides believed that truth is eternal, unshakable, and beyond the reach of mere opinion. To understand his insight, imagine the difference between the deep foundations of a mountain and the shifting dust that blows across its surface. The mountain endures, unmoved, while the dust swirls in whichever direction the wind carries it. In our lives, opinions, our own and those of others, are like that dust. They come and go, changing with the circumstances, shaped by moods, fears, or fleeting perceptions. But truth, like the mountain, stands unmoved. Confidence begins to grow when we stop anchoring our identity in what changes from moment to moment and instead root ourselves in what is lasting. Many people live in fear of how they are perceived. They adjust their actions constantly, worrying about criticism or chasing approval, as though they must reinvent themselves daily. But if we remember Parmenides' teaching, we begin to see how empty that pursuit can be. What people think of us today can shift tomorrow. Their praise can turn into judgment. Their indifference can turn into admiration. None of it is solid, none of it is enduring. To build confidence, we must realize that truth is not dependent on these shifting perceptions. Just as the sun does not rely on human eyes to shine, your worth does not rely on human approval to exist. When you stand firm in truth, your confidence is no longer fragile. Opinions lose their power to control you. Criticism, which once felt like a heavy weight, becomes only a sound carried on the wind. Praise, which once felt like a lifeline, becomes an encouragement but not a necessity. This shift is not about arrogance. It is about security. It is about knowing that your value is not something given to you by others, and therefore it cannot be taken away by them either. That is the essence of Parmenides' lesson: truth is unshakable, and when we root ourselves in it, so are we. History gives us countless reminders of this principle. Consider the prophets and reformers who walked their paths in defiance of the crowd. Many of them were ridiculed, doubted, or even condemned by the voices of their time. Yet their conviction did not falter, because they were not standing on the ground of opinion, but on the rock of truth as they understood it. Centuries later, their words still endure. While the judgments of their critics have vanished into dust, confidence grows when we learn to see this pattern, that the voices of doubt are always temporary, but truth endures beyond them. In our daily lives, we can practice this by examining the thoughts that run through our minds. How many of them are based on opinion rather than truth? If a voice within says, "You are not capable," is that truth or just an opinion colored by fear? If the world says, "You are not enough," is that reality or just a projection of its own insecurity? Parmenides would tell us to hold fast to what cannot be denied: that you exist, that you are capable of growth, that your being itself is unshakable. Every other thought, especially those that diminish you, belongs to the realm of fleeting opinion, and when you stop giving those opinions authority, they lose their ability to weaken your confidence. There is also freedom in this realization, for if truth is unchanging, then you do not need to constantly chase it or reinvent yourself to stay aligned with it. You only need to return to it, again and again, whenever doubt or fear pulls you away. This is like a sailor who, no matter how rough the storm, can always find guidance by the fixed stars above. The stars do not bend to the storm, they remain, and their light provides direction. In the same way, truth remains steady even when our emotions rage or the world seems uncertain. Confidence comes when we learn to navigate by truth instead of being tossed around by every passing wave of opinion. Of course, this path is not always easy. The world is loud, and its voices often demand to be heard. Opinions surround us in every direction, from media, from friends, from strangers who know little about us yet speak as though their words define us. To stand firm in truth requires strength, discipline, and patience. It means listening carefully and discerning what is real, refusing to let ourselves be deceived by the glitter of approval or the sting of rejection. It means returning to the mountain, not the dust, whenever we feel shaken. And every time we do, our confidence grows a little stronger, because we realize we are standing on ground that cannot move. Think of the quiet strength that comes with this stance. You no longer need to argue endlessly to prove yourself right. You no longer need to perform for acceptance. You no longer collapse under the weight of every criticism. Instead, you become steady, calm, assured. This is not the confidence of loud boasting, but the quiet certainty of one who knows where they stand. It is the strength of roots that go deep into the earth, invisible perhaps, but unshakable in a storm. In the end, to embrace the unshakable nature of truth is to embrace a new way of being. Confidence stops being something you chase through achievements, possessions, or approval, and becomes something you already have when you live in alignment with what is real. You may still hear opinions, you may still feel doubts, but they no longer control your steps. They pass like shadows while you continue walking in the light. This is what it means to stand firm in being, and it is the first step to discovering the unbreakable confidence that Parmenides pointed us toward, a confidence that endures just as truth endures, through every storm and every age, aligning naturally with the strength of inner stability, the silence of contradictions, the consistency of values, and the courage to face uncertainty. Clarity begins when we are willing to ask ourselves the most fundamental question: what is real? Parmenides believed that truth is not hidden in appearances or illusions but exists as something whole, indivisible, and eternal. In our lives, much of the uncertainty and lack of confidence comes from mistaking shadows for substance. We confuse opinions for facts, feelings for permanent states, and appearances for reality. This confusion clouds our thinking and shakes our self-belief, because when we build on what is not solid, we inevitably feel unstable. Confidence demands clarity, and clarity is only possible when we learn to distinguish between what is real and what is illusion. Imagine walking through a dense fog. Every step feels uncertain because you cannot see where the ground ends or where obstacles might lie. But the fog is not reality. It is only a covering that hides reality from view. As the fog clears, the path reveals itself. The ground feels firmer beneath your feet, and you move with more assurance. This is what clarity does to the human spirit. It clears the fog of illusion so that we can see where we are, who we are, and where we must go. Parmenides taught that being, the true reality, is unchanging and firm. When we align ourselves with this truth, the fog of confusion begins to lift, and confidence naturally follows. Consider how often doubt arises from illusions. You may think you are not capable of achieving something because of one failure in the past, yet that failure is not truth. It is only a moment, an event that has passed. The unchanging truth is that you are capable of growth, of learning, of becoming more than you were yesterday. But when the illusion of failure clouds your mind, you mistake it for reality, and your confidence fades. Or think about how society projects images of success, wealth, status, recognition, as though they define worth. Many people chase these appearances, thinking they are reality, only to find themselves empty when the illusion dissolves. Real confidence comes when you no longer depend on appearances but stand firm in what cannot be taken away. This search for clarity is not new. Throughout history, thinkers and seekers have faced the same challenge, separating truth from illusion. Socrates built his entire method on questioning assumptions to uncover what is real. The prophets of faith spoke against false idols and illusions that distracted people from eternal truth. Even in our daily lives, the most resilient individuals are those who refuse to let illusions dictate their choices. They are not swayed by passing trends or by the shallow judgments of others. They live by what they know to be real, and that gives them confidence even in uncertain times. Clarity requires courage. It is easier to accept illusions because they are often comforting. They tell us what we want to hear, even if it is not true. Facing reality can be uncomfortable because it demands honesty. It forces us to admit where we have been deceived, where we have believed in shadows rather than substance. But only through this honesty do we gain real confidence. For when you stand on truth, you no longer fear being exposed. When illusions fall away, there is nothing left to hide. That freedom itself becomes a source of strength. There is also a practical dimension to this. Think of an athlete training for competition. If they believe illusions, thinking they are already strong enough without effort, or believing they can succeed without discipline, they will fail. But if they face the reality of their current condition and the work required, they can grow stronger and more confident with each step. The same applies in every area of life. Whether in relationships, career, or personal growth, clarity about what is real allows us to act with confidence, because we are no longer building castles in the air, but foundations on rock. Another important aspect of clarity is consistency. Illusions shift constantly, just like opinions. One day, you may feel capable because circumstances favor you, and the next you may feel small because of criticism. But reality does not shift with moods. Parmenides argued that truth is eternal. It simply is. When your confidence is built on that kind of clarity, it remains steady through changes. You may face challenges, but you know they are temporary. You may face setbacks, but you know they do not erase your essence. You may face uncertainty, but you know that truth itself remains, and that knowledge gives you the power to keep moving forward. The world today makes clarity even more difficult, because illusions are everywhere. Media is filled with curated images that pretend to show reality, but are only fragments, manipulated to appear whole. Voices shout for attention, each claiming to be truth, while most are only opinions dressed in certainty. If we let ourselves be carried away by this noise, we lose confidence because we are pulled in 1,000 directions at once. But when we practice stillness, when we pause and return to the question of what is real, we begin to silence the noise. In that silence, clarity shines through, and with it comes the calm assurance that we are not lost. Even if the world seems chaotic, living with clarity does not mean you will never face doubt again, but it changes your relationship to doubt. Instead of letting it paralyze you, you learn to test it against truth. Instead of believing every thought that arises, you measure it against what you know to be real. Over time, this practice becomes natural, and your confidence becomes harder to shake. You begin to embody the very principle Parmenides spoke of, that truth simply is, and by standing with it, you too become steady, firm, and assured. To seek clarity, then, is not only to pursue knowledge but to pursue strength. It is to walk out of the fog and onto solid ground. It is to live with confidence not because illusions flatter you, but because truth sustains you. And in this way, clarity opens the door to the deeper dimensions of confidence, inner stability, freedom from contradictions, the consistency of a life aligned with values, and the courage to face uncertainty without fear. Parmenides insisted that being is unbroken, indestructible, and unmoved by anything outside of itself. This teaching, though philosophical, carries a profound lesson for life. True confidence arises from inner stability. When we look at the world around us, we see constant change. Seasons shift, fortunes rise and fall, people's moods swing from joy to anger, praise turns into blame. If we attempt to root our confidence in these external circumstances, we find ourselves constantly shaken. One day we feel strong because everything goes our way, and the next we collapse because something changed. But Parmenides reminds us that the essence of existence itself does not break, does not waver, does not vanish. To find unshakable confidence, we must learn to cultivate the same inner stability. Think of a tree with deep roots. The storms may bend its branches, the winds may roar, and the rains may flood, but the tree stands tall because its roots go deep into the earth. Human beings are much the same. If our confidence only grows in fair weather, then storms will topple us. But if our roots sink into something steady, our values, our inner strength, the truth of our being, then no storm can uproot us. The branches of our lives may sway, but the trunk stands firm. This is the essence of inner stability. It is not the absence of struggle, but the ability to remain grounded while struggle surrounds us. Inner stability does not come by accident. It is the fruit of discipline. Just as a musician practices scales to master the instrument, or a warrior trains daily to sharpen the sword, we must train our minds to hold steady against the chaos of life. One way to practice this is by becoming aware of how easily we let external circumstances control our confidence. A single harsh word can ruin our day. A minor setback can make us question our worth. These are signs that our roots are shallow, but if we remind ourselves, again and again, that our essence does not change with every opinion or every obstacle, then slowly we begin to detach our sense of self from these passing storms. Confidence grows naturally from this discipline because it is no longer dependent on fragile conditions. History offers us countless examples of those who embodied this stability. Think of Socrates standing before his judges, accused and condemned, yet unshaken in his principles. The crowd could condemn his body, but they could not move his soul from its truth. Think of prophets who carried their message despite rejection, exile, or even threats of death. They found stability not in worldly approval, but in the certainty of their mission. Even in the Islamic tradition, One can recall the courage of the early believers who stood firm against persecution, their confidence unbroken because their roots were in truth rather than in the shifting opinions of the crowd. These figures remind us that the deepest kind of strength is not loud defiance, but the quiet stability that cannot be moved. In our own lives, cultivating stability means learning to face change without losing ourselves. The job may change, relationships may evolve, challenges may arise, but our essence, our being, remains. When we realize this, fear begins to loosen its grip. Much of human anxiety comes from the belief that change will destroy us, that setbacks will define us, that rejection will erase us. But when we root ourselves in the awareness that being itself cannot be broken, we realize that we, too, are more enduring than we think. Confidence is not the absence of fear, but the ability to stand steady while fear attempts to shake us. Stability also allows us to live with consistency. When you are easily swayed by circumstances, you may act one way today and another tomorrow, driven by emotion rather than principle. But when you are stable, your actions align with your values regardless of the situation. You become someone others can rely on because your character is not fragile. This consistency itself builds confidence, not just in you, but also in those around you, who recognize that your word can be trusted and your presence can be counted on. Another dimension of stability is the ability to silence the noise within. Doubts and conflicting thoughts can pull us in many directions, but stability brings calm. It is like the ocean on the surface, waves crash and foam, but deep below, the waters remain still. To cultivate inner stability is to learn to live from that depth rather than being tossed by every surface wave. Meditation, reflection, and self-awareness are ways of deepening into that stillness. And from that stillness, confidence emerges, not as a loud proclamation but as a quiet certainty that does not need constant reassurance. Yet stability is not the same as stubbornness. To be stable is not to refuse change, but to remain rooted even as change happens around you. A tree does not resist the wind by refusing to bend. It survives because it bends without breaking. Similarly, we must adapt to life without losing our center. This balance between flexibility and rootedness is what gives confidence its unshakable quality. You can adapt to new situations, but you do not lose your essence in the process. You can accept setbacks, but you do not let them define your worth. You can listen to criticism, but you are not broken by it. When inner stability becomes your foundation, courage naturally follows. You are no longer terrified by uncertainty, because uncertainty cannot uproot your being. You are no longer paralyzed by fear of loss, because what is essential cannot be taken away. This is the deep confidence that Parmenides points us toward, not a shallow self-assurance built on circumstances, but an unshakable steadiness rooted in truth. And from here, it becomes possible to silence contradictions, to live with consistency, and to face uncertainty with courage that endures. Parmenides argued that contradictions cannot belong to reality, for what truly exists simply is, and what does not exist cannot be. This idea, though abstract at first, holds an extraordinary power for shaping the way we live. Much of the lack of confidence we experience comes from the contradictions we carry inside, conflicting beliefs, clashing desires, divided thoughts. One part of us says, "I can," while another whispers, "I cannot." One part of us wants to move forward, while another clings to fear. These contradictions pull us apart, leaving us unstable and unsure. To silence them is not to suppress our humanity, but to recognize that truth itself is not divided, and that the more we align with truth, the more whole and confident we become. Consider how exhausting contradictions can be. A person who tells themselves they are capable, yet constantly entertains the thought that they are unworthy, is like someone trying to sail with both sails pulling in opposite directions. The boat goes nowhere. Energy is wasted, and frustration builds. In the same way, inner contradictions waste our strength. We may want to pursue a dream, but then undermine ourselves with fear of failure. We may believe in honesty, but compromise it for approval. These contradictions fracture our confidence, because they divide our being. The path to confidence requires us to seek unity, to let our actions, words, and beliefs flow in one direction. This unity does not come from ignoring the conflicts within us, but from resolving them. It begins with awareness, noticing when we say one thing but do another, when we hold a value but act against it, when we desire success but sabotage ourselves through procrastination or doubt. Each contradiction we carry weakens us, but each resolution strengthens us. Confidence grows not because life becomes easier, but because we become whole. Just as a wall built from scattered stones crumbles easily, but stones joined together become strong, so too does a unified self stand firm where a divided self falters. History offers us striking illustrations of this principle. Think of leaders who stood unwavering because their convictions were not divided. Their message, their lives, and their actions pointed in one direction, and that gave them immense confidence even in the face of opposition. On the other hand, history also shows us figures who faltered because of contradictions. Leaders who preached one principle but practiced another eventually lost the confidence of others, and often their own. The lesson is clear: to be confident, we must silence contradictions by seeking integrity, letting truth, not self-deception, guide our lives. Contradictions also appear in how we see ourselves. Many people walk through life carrying conflicting self-images, at times proud, at times deeply insecure, at times hopeful, at times consumed by despair. While fluctuations in emotion are natural, allowing contradictory beliefs about our worth to dominate us leads to instability. If, at your core, you accept the truth that you are capable of growth, then you must silence the inner voice that says you are destined to fail. If you accept the truth that being itself is indestructible, then you must stop believing that a temporary setback destroys your essence. To silence contradictions is not to eliminate every doubt, but to stop giving doubts the same authority as truth. This path also demands courage. Contradictions often remain within us because it feels safer to keep them than to resolve them. For example, a person may claim to value freedom but remain tied to habits that enslave them. To resolve that contradiction requires effort and honesty. But once resolved, the energy that was lost in inner conflict is reclaimed, and confidence flourishes. It is like releasing a weight you did not realize you were carrying. The inner unity that follows becomes a foundation that no external force can easily shake. Silencing contradictions also strengthens our relationships with others. People are drawn to those who are whole, because their words and actions align. When we speak one thing and live another, trust is broken, and trust is the foundation of influence. But when our inner unity radiates outward, others sense the confidence it creates. This is not arrogance but authenticity. It is the kind of presence that makes others feel secure, because they know they are dealing with someone steady, not divided. In daily practice, we can silence contradictions by continually asking, does this choice align with my values? Do my actions reflect my truth, or am I betraying myself for approval or comfort? Each time we bring our lives closer to unity, we silence the noise of conflict inside. And with each step, confidence grows. Not as a performance but as a natural state of being. It is important to note that contradictions do not disappear overnight. They are part of the human journey. But the more we become aware of them and commit ourselves to truth, the more we close the gap between who we are and who we are becoming. Confidence then arises from integrity, from knowing that even if we stumble, we are moving in one direction, not two. When contradictions are silenced, the mind grows quieter. Instead of being pulled apart, we feel aligned. Decisions become clearer because we are not wrestling with opposing voices. Challenges become less intimidating because we face them as whole beings rather than divided selves. And most importantly, confidence becomes steady because it flows from unity with truth, not from temporary illusions. To live without contradictions is to live with inner peace. It is to walk a path where your beliefs, words, and actions strengthen one another instead of cancelling one another out. This is the confidence Parmenides points us toward, not a fleeting feeling, but a state of wholeness rooted in the unbroken nature of truth. And from this wholeness arises the consistency that strengthens character and the courage that allows us to face uncertainty without fear. Parmenides described being as one and continuous, without breaks or gaps, without beginning or end. In this image of unbroken continuity lies a powerful lesson for how we can build confidence in life. Consistency is the human reflection of that eternal oneness. Just as being does not fragment, so too must our words, actions, and values align if we want to experience unshakable confidence. Without consistency, our lives become scattered. Our efforts lose momentum, and our confidence falters because we cannot trust ourselves. With consistency, however, we become reliable not only to others but to ourselves, and that reliability becomes the foundation for true strength. Consider how we often undermine our own confidence by inconsistency. We set goals, but we do not follow through. We make promises, but we do not keep them. We commit to values, but we compromise them when circumstances become uncomfortable. Each inconsistency weakens the bond of trust we have with ourselves, and without self-trust, confidence cannot stand. It is not the great failures of life that erode confidence most. It is the small daily inconsistencies that chip away at it, until one day we realize we no longer believe in our own word. To stand firm, then, we must learn from the teaching of Parmenides being is continuous, and we must mirror that continuity in the way we live. The power of consistency lies in its cumulative strength. A single action may seem small, but when repeated day after day, it becomes a force. A stone may look powerless against water, yet the steady drip of water carves valleys into mountains. In the same way, confidence is not built in one dramatic act, but through the steady repetition of living in alignment with our values and promises. Each time we do what we say we will do, each time we choose integrity over convenience, we strengthen our confidence like layers of stone laid one upon another, forming a wall that cannot be shaken. Think of the most respected figures in history and faith. Their greatness did not come from occasional bursts of brilliance, but from lives marked by consistency. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, earned the title of Al-Amin, the trustworthy, long before his prophethood, because his words and actions were consistent. Socrates lived in such alignment with his teaching that he chose death rather than betray his principles. Their confidence did not come from luck or circumstance, but from the deep strength of living consistently with truth. That same strength is available to us when we allow our daily choices to reflect continuity rather than contradiction. Consistency also creates clarity in our relationships with others. People learn to trust those who are predictable in character. When someone acts one way today and another tomorrow, no one knows where they stand. But when your life is marked by consistency, others feel secure in your presence, and that trust amplifies your confidence. Confidence grows not just within, but also through the reflection of others' trust, and that trust can only be earned through the steady reliability of consistency. There is a hidden freedom in this as well. Inconsistency is exhausting because it forces us to wear masks, to remember which version of ourselves we showed in one place and which in another. But when we live consistently, there is no mask to maintain. Our inner truth aligns with our outer expression. That alignment simplifies life and gives rise to confidence because we no longer fear being exposed. We are already whole, already unified, already consistent. Consistency does not mean rigidity. It does not mean we never adapt or change. Life will always call us to grow, to adjust, to learn from experience. But consistency means that even as we adapt, our core values remain steady. It means that while methods may change, principles do not. Just as a river flows with many bends but remains one continuous stream, our lives can evolve while still flowing with consistency of purpose. This is the kind of consistency that builds confidence, because it assures us that no matter the situation, we are still rooted in what we stand for. Practicing consistency begins with small choices. Waking each day and choosing to keep your word to yourself, even in minor matters, lays the groundwork for greater confidence in larger challenges. Every time you honor your own commitment, you add another thread to the fabric of trust you are weaving with yourself. Over time, that fabric becomes strong enough to withstand doubt, criticism, or adversity. And when you falter, as all people do, returning to consistency quickly is what restores strength. It is not perfection but persistence that builds confidence. The more consistent we become, the more resilient we are in the face of change. Inconsistency makes us fragile because it leaves us without a stable foundation. Consistency makes us resilient because it gives us something unchanging to stand on, no matter how much the world shifts. This mirrors the very principle of Parmenides' teaching. Being is continuous and whole, unbroken by change, and when we live in continuity, we too partake of that strength. Ultimately, consistency transforms confidence from a fleeting feeling into a lasting state. Instead of relying on external affirmations or temporary success to feel secure, We build confidence from within, grounded in the knowledge that we can trust ourselves. That trust radiates outward, influencing how we speak, act, and face challenges. And as consistency strengthens, so too does the quiet stability that roots us, the silencing of contradictions that unifies us, and the courage that allows us to meet uncertainty with unshakable strength. Parmenides' vision of being as indestructible carries within it a profound lesson for how we can face fear and uncertainty. He taught that what truly exists cannot be destroyed, cannot be undone, cannot be diminished by change. When we translate that idea into our own lives, it reminds us that at the core of who we are, there is something unbreakable. Fear thrives on the illusion of fragility. It whispers that if we fail, we will be ruined. If we are rejected, we will be worthless. If we face uncertainty, we will be lost. But when we anchor ourselves in the truth that our essence is not so easily destroyed, fear loses its grip. Confidence grows not from denying fear, but from realizing that nothing essential can be taken from us. Much of human hesitation comes from focusing on what can be lost rather than what endures. We worry about losing status, possessions, opportunities, or relationships, and in this worry, we paralyze ourselves. Yet Parmenides would remind us that these are part of the world of change, not of true being. They may shift, appear, and disappear, but they are not the measure of our essence. When we see this clearly, setbacks become less terrifying. Losing a job may shake your circumstances, but it does not erase your worth. Failing at a task may bruise your pride, but it does not diminish your capacity to grow. Rejection may hurt, but it does not alter the truth of your being. By separating what is essential from what is temporary, we can meet uncertainty with courage, because we know that at the deepest level, we remain whole. History shows us how this truth becomes a source of unshakable strength. Consider those who endured exile, imprisonment, or poverty, yet carried themselves with dignity and courage. Their circumstances were stripped away, but their inner essence remained untouched. It was this recognition that gave them the courage to endure. In Islamic history, the early companions of the Prophet faced severe persecution, yet they stood firm because they knew that no suffering could destroy the truth they carried within. Their bodies could be harmed, their possessions taken, but their essence, their being, remained invincible. That is the kind of confidence Parmenides points toward, a strength born from knowing that the core of who you are cannot be broken. Facing uncertainty becomes easier when we accept that change is inevitable but destruction of essence is impossible. Fear feeds on the unknown, but courage thrives on trust. Trust that even if the path ahead is unclear, we carry within us the ability to endure, to adapt, to grow. Think of a traveler stepping into a desert with no clear path marked out. Fear says, "You will be lost." Confidence says, "I may not see the whole way, but I know I can take the next step." This shift transforms the unknown from a source of terror into a field of possibility. Uncertainty stops being the enemy and becomes the very stage where confidence is proven. It is also important to see that fear often magnifies illusions. The mind projects outcomes worse than reality, creating monsters out of shadows. But when we hold to the truth of our unbreakable essence, we can face those shadows with steadiness. Even if the worst happens, even if we stumble or fall, we do not cease to exist. We remain, and from that place we can rise again. Every person who has recovered from loss, every individual who has risen after failure, has demonstrated this principle in life. What seemed like the end was only a moment, and their being carried them through to another beginning. Confidence is built in exactly this way, through walking straight into uncertainty and discovering that we endure. There is a deep freedom in this realization. When you no longer fear being destroyed by failure, you are free to attempt greater things. When you no longer fear rejection, you are free to speak your truth. When you no longer fear uncertainty, you are free to step into new opportunities. Confidence blooms when fear no longer dictates your choices, because you know that no matter what happens, you will remain. This is not blind optimism but rooted strength. The recognition that you are anchored in something beyond the reach of change. The discipline of courage grows through practice. Just as a muscle strengthens by repeated use, courage strengthens every time we act despite fear. Each time we face uncertainty and realize we have not been broken, our confidence deepens. Over time, the voice of fear grows weaker, because it has been proven wrong again and again. This practice mirrors the unchanging truth Parmenides spoke of, the reality that being simply is. The more we act in alignment with that truth, the more unshakable we become. Facing fear and uncertainty with courage also connects us to others. When people see someone stand firm in the midst of difficulty, they are reminded of their own strength. Confidence is not only personal, it is contagious. Just as fear spreads quickly in groups, so does courage. By standing firm, we inspire others to believe that they too can endure. In this way, courage rooted in being becomes a light that shines not only for ourselves but also for those around us. Ultimately, to stand firm against fear and uncertainty is to embrace life fully. It is to step into challenges knowing that you may stumble, but you cannot be erased. It is to face the unknown with the assurance that being endures, and therefore you endure. This unshakable confidence allows us to move forward without hesitation, to live consistently with our values, to silence inner contradictions, and to cultivate the deep stability that keeps us grounded no matter what storms come. It ties together every lesson from Parmenides, showing that true confidence is not a fragile flame, but a fire rooted in the eternal strength of being itself.